Game theory talk between Macbeth and Banquo.
You know, Banquo, I've been reading up on game theory lately. It's such a fascinating field.
Oh, really? Game theory? What's that all about?
Well, it's all about studying how people make strategic decisions when they interact with each other. It's like a mathematical way to analyze human behavior.
Interesting. Give me an example.
Alright, imagine two people in a situation where they can either cooperate or compete, and they both want to maximize their outcomes. This is called the prisoner's dilemma.
Prisoner's dilemma? Tell me more.
Sure. So, there are these two prisoners, let's call them Alice and Bob. They're arrested for a crime they committed together. Now, they have to decide whether to cooperate with each other and stay silent or betray each other by confessing to the crime.
What happens if they both stay silent?
Well, if they both cooperate, stay silent, they each get a shorter sentence. It's like they trust each other.
But if one of them confesses and the other doesn't?
Exactly. If one confesses, defects, and the other doesn't, the one who confesses gets off easy, while the one who remains silent gets a harsher punishment.
That's tricky. So, what do they usually do?
That's where it gets interesting. Each prisoner individually wants to defect because it's the safest bet for them. But if they both defect, they both end up worse off than if they had both cooperated.
So, it's a dilemma because even though cooperation is better for both, the fear of getting the worst outcome drives them to defect.
Exactly. It's a classic example of how self-interest can lead to suboptimal outcomes.
And what's this Nash Equilibrium you mentioned earlier?
Good question. Nash Equilibrium is a crucial concept in game theory. It's like the heart of many strategic situations.
How does it work?
Well, in the context of the prisoner's dilemma, Nash Equilibrium is a situation where neither Alice nor Bob has any incentive to change their strategy once they know the other's strategy. In other words, it's a stable outcome.
So, does that mean if they both confess, it's a Nash Equilibrium?
Exactly. If both prisoners confess, and they both know that, then neither of them has an incentive to switch to cooperation, because staying with their strategy is their best response to the other's strategy.
That's quite a powerful concept. But what if there's a better way for them to both benefit?
That's where game theory gets even more interesting. Sometimes, there's a Pareto efficient outcome, where both players can be better off without making the other worse off. But in the prisoner's dilemma, it's elusive because self-interest often prevails.
So, even though they could both benefit from cooperating, the fear of the worst outcome pushes them to confess. It's a tricky balance between self-interest and cooperation.
You've got it! Game theory helps us understand these complex dynamics in decision-making, not just in crime scenarios but in economics, business, and even everyday interactions.
Thanks for sharing, Macbeth. Game theory sounds like a fascinating way to analyze how we make decisions in strategic situations.
It absolutely is, Banquo. It's like peeling back the layers of human behavior and finding the math behind it.
To game theory, the science of strategic thinking.
To game theory, the science of strategic thinking. Speaking of Pareto efficiency, it's another essential concept. In a game or any decision-making scenario, it represents a situation where no player can be made better off without making another player worse off.
So, it's about finding the best possible outcome where everyone benefits, right?
Exactly. In the prisoner's dilemma, achieving Pareto efficiency is challenging because the best outcome for both, in theory, is cooperation, where they both serve a shorter sentence.
But since they're worried about the other defecting, they end up in a situation where neither can improve their position without making the other worse off.
You've got it! Pareto efficiency helps us identify situations where there's no room for improvement without hurting someone else's interests.
Can game theory be applied to real-life situations outside of crime scenarios?
Absolutely! Game theory is used in economics, politics, business, and even in everyday life. For instance, in business, companies use game theory to strategize pricing and competition. It's everywhere.
So, it's not just about prisoners in jail. It's about understanding human behavior and decision-making in various contexts.
That's the beauty of game theory. It gives us a structured way to analyze complex interactions and predict how people might behave.
Thanks for sharing, Macbeth. Game theory sounds like a powerful tool for understanding and navigating the strategic aspects of life.
You're welcome, Banquo. And remember, whether it's in a coffee shop conversation or in the boardroom, game theory can provide valuable insights into how people make choices.
To game theory, the science of life strategies.
To game theory, indeed.